Okay, so I am the owner of Vital Kidney Nutrition. It is an online nutrition counseling service for those with chronic kidney disease. And my mission is to help those with chronic kidney disease slow, stop, or delay the progression of their kidney disease so they can potentially avoid ending up on dialysis. So I wanted to talk about food tracking because it's definitely a hot topic and something I'm asked about all the time. So before we get into my personal choice of app for food tracking, which is Cronometer, I'm just going to talk about some pros and cons of food tracking and just some things that you should know before you start doing this, or just clue you in on what to think about if you are already tracking your food. So let's talk about the pros of tracking your intake. So first of all, you're going to have a better awareness of your food choices. So food tracking apps can help you become aware of, just a better understanding of what you're choosing. And there are studies that show that people that even write down what they're eating tend to make healthier choices. Because when you're thinking about it, like a lot of people it's like a mental thing. Like people think in their head, like, oh, like I don't want to write down that I ate something that I shouldn't have. So for some people that can help keep them on track. And that kind of goes into another reason is just accountability. So it's going to help you stay accountable to whatever goals you set for yourself by, logging your food, and you're seeing your calories, your protein, your carbs, all of that. So if you have specific goals in mind that you're trying to reach, it can definitely keep you accountable when you're tracking all of this in an app. So I think those are the main pros of food tracking and why people tend to do it. So, of course, there are some cons to it. The number one issue is just the time that it takes. I think this is one of the main reasons not everyone is using this type of tool. I try and log my food intake here and there, and I admit, it's time consuming. And sometimes it's a little bit frustrating. Like if you say you eat like a mixed dish, like soup, there's like vegetables, broth, rice, beans, there could be all these ingredients, and then trying to figure out, okay, how much rice did I have in this soup? So sometimes it's just difficult figuring out what to enter for a certain food. So that takes some time, and it, can be a little bit frustrating. One of the more important cons to consider, if you have a history of any sort of disordered eating, I don't recommend food tracking because it can be very triggering. Or if you think, if you have, some people become very obsessive with it, and that could kind of outweigh the benefits for some people, because you don't really want to feel like food is overtaking your life. That's just a little too much. So a con of food tracking specific to chronic kidney disease is that, first of all, if you're worried about certain nutrients like potassium and phosphorus, these nutrients are sometimes going to be missing on certain foods. Like if it's a specific, like branded food, Sometimes it's just going to give you the calories, fat, carbs, like the basic macronutrients. Potassium is a little bit better now since food companies are required to test for potassium and put it on the label. Potassium isn't really as difficult to figure out these days, but phosphorus, however, it's still pretty difficult. We're not going to know the phosphorus of every single food item if it's, something like packaged, because food companies just aren't required to test for this. And it's, so they're not required to put it on the label. So some of these nutrients they're going to be a little bit inaccurate. It could be, you could be getting underreporting for phosphorus, especially. Another thing to consider is that it's not always about the number. Like when it comes to phosphorus is a big one. So for CKD, maybe around 800 to 1,000 milligrams of phosphorus per day is recommended. But now we're realizing what's more important is actually considering the source of phosphorus. So phosphorus in different foods has a different bioavailability, meaning our body is absorbing a certain amount. So if it's like a food with a phosphorus additive, that's 100% bioavailable. If it's a plant food like nuts or beans, that's less than 40% bioavailable, like anywhere from 10 to 40%. So the numbers don't tell us the bioavailability. Like if the bioavailability is, or say, let's just pretend a cup of chickpeas has 100 milligrams of phosphorus. So that's going to show up in your food tracking app, but your body is only absorbing maybe 40 milligrams. So the food tracking app doesn't deduct a percentage for the bioavailability. And the same thing actually goes for potassium. So potassium also has different bioavailabilities. We do not absorb all the potassium in fruits and vegetables, like from whole fruits and vegetables, because of all the fibers that are in there. When it comes to a food with potassium additives, we do absorb 100%. So that is definitely one of the negatives for food tracking, because people really focus too much on these numbers and not going over them. But in actuality, that's just not how our bodies work. We're not necessarily absorbing 100% of these nutrients. So I am going to share my screen and bring up cronometer. So let's go here. Or cronometer. I pronounce it both ways, cronometer and cronometer, but I guess I've always called it cronometer. And then I was listening to some of these tutorials and then they were pronouncing it cronometer. So whatever way you pronounce it, it's fine. So, okay, now I have it up. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So this is the web-based version of cronometer. So move this out of the way. So it is an app you can download on your phone. And in the app, I'm just going to open it on my phone just to look so I can compare it. Yeah, so in the app, you're going to have some of these buttons down on the bottom. And then in the middle, you're going to see something similar to this. So I kind of like using it on the computer sometimes. I think it's just a little bit easier to add things. But, you know, if you have the app, you can go back and forth. So if I had food logged on my app, it would show up here. So you can go back and forth, which is nice. But I can't share my iPhone screen, so I'm going to do it this way. So how you work this app is basically, so pretend I'm logging breakfast. So I click on breakfast, I'm going to click on food, and then basically search for the food. So you can be specific, like if it's, say you had like Kashi cereal, like I'll type Kashi and it'll come up with a bazillion Kashi cereals. So let's just say I had this, and then you're going to adjust the serving size. So say you had like a cup, add to diary, and then say I had almond milk with it. So it'll give you some brands sometimes. I'm just going to go with this. And then you can change cup, ounces, whatever measurement works for you. 4 ounces. And then I'm going to add a fruit. I'll add a banana. And then you can kind of change it however you wish. So this is my breakfast. And then down below, it gives me, this is basically the nutrition breakdown for all 3 items. So it tells you all of these different vitamins, minerals. And if I click on, if I have this selected, it's just going to bring me up the nutrition for that selected item. On the app, you can't really do this. It'll just show you a running total of what you've eaten for today and in the different nutrients. But it's definitely a lot easier to see all of the nutrients in the web-based version, which is really helpful. So a cool function that I like to utilize is the custom recipes. So on the app, you also can do this. If you click the foods button, and then you could do either create recipe or import recipe. So I like to do the import recipe when I have, a lot of times I'll find recipes online. So what you do, I'm basically taking a recipe, copying it, and then pasting it, and then import. And then it's going to bring up the ingredients of that recipe. So sometimes this is inaccurate, so you do have to kind of cross-check, make sure the measurements are right, because sometimes, see, it'll pop up here. I'm just going to adjust serving size. And then the parsley was fresh parsley to serve. So I'm just going to delete it, because I don't usually add parsley anyways. So, and then it'll just give you the serving size for the full recipe. So you're going to want to look at, the recipe does say 3 servings, I believe. Yeah, serves 3. How do I get this to? Okay. And then I can go to servings, and then each serving, this is the nutrients. So when you have your recipe entered, click Save Changes, and it'll go into your recipe list. So basically, if I hit custom recipes, these are all the recipes that I've entered. And then that way, you can add it to your diary. So say I had that recipe for dinner. Let's see, if I go to add food, go over to custom, and then these are all my recipes. I'm going to add that. I'm going to add 1 serving of that recipe. So yeah, those are the features I use the most. I just, adding food and then the recipes, because the recipes are really helpful. Because that's one of the frustrations that, people have, is just figuring out like, how to enter like the individual ingredients of the meal. And when it's certain meals, like it's fine. Like something like this meal, herb, potato, asparagus, chickpeas, sheet pea and dinner. Like you could more easily figure out, okay, I ate like half a cup of potatoes, half a cup of asparagus. But if it's something like a soup, it is more difficult to kind of do it that way. So some cool features that you can look at with Cronometer, you can set it up to whatever your nutrient needs are. So if you go to settings and then okay, profile and targets. So you just enter your height and weight in here, and it will kind of come up with your basal metabolic rate that will be calculated by the app. You can adjust your activity level, and then you scroll down. You can put in a weight goal, and you can adjust the calories. If you want to lose weight, you can bring that down. If you want to gain weight, bring that up, and it'll basically recalculate your calorie needs. And then you can adjust your macros. A lot of times I tell people just to focus on, for CKD, like just focusing on the protein, because that's, for most people, that's something they're trying to watch, because it does get a little bit frustrating for some people when they're not able to meet the exact amount of carbs and fat during the day. So, I mean, for a lot of people, they may not need to necessarily track net carbs and fat. Like for me, like I have this set up, but I'm always way, way, way over my fat intake. But I don't really focus on that per se. You can adjust the vitamins, minerals, all these things, which is really nice. So those are some of the things. Oh, I'll show you something else that is really cool. Let's go back to, let's look at a day that I logged things. So this is on the paid version. You can figure out your CRAL score. So that is the protein renal acid load, and it's basically telling you how alkaline or acidic your diet is. So you want your diet to be more alkaline, ideally with CKD, more so in the later stages. In the earlier stages, your kidneys are still pretty good at handling the acid-base balance, but definitely like stage 4, stage 5, more alkaline diets are associated with slower progression of kidney disease. And this is good because it gives you your score. So that is a nice feature. A lot of these trackers I don't necessarily focus on too much. It's not really related to CKD per se. Yeah, so In general, I think the Cronometer app is the most comprehensive. They have the best food database out of all the other apps I've looked at. I certainly haven't looked at every single one because there's just so many and there are always new ones coming up. So if there's one that is newer that you found, you can let me know and I'll look into it. But yeah, I think this is a really, they have pretty much every food that I need to find. Another thing I'll mention on the app, what is really handy is you can scan barcodes of food items. So that does make it a little bit quicker for entering foods. So say like I had breakfast, I had like toast and like yogurt or something. I could just scan the barcodes of like the bread of the yogurt and then it'll populate. And then you'll just select the serving size and save it. So that's a good time saving feature of the app. But in general, I mean, food tracking, it's just a tool. It's not the end all be all. It's not something you necessarily have to do, but it is helpful in seeing about how much sodium, potassium, protein, and all of these other fun nutrients you're getting in per day. If you have any questions about food tracking, feel free to leave a comment and I can get back to you. But otherwise, I hope this was helpful and I will make sure to upload this as well. Let me just figure out, stop sharing. Okay. All right, so any questions, let me know. And okay, thank you for joining me.